In part two with Tim Kenny, we're going to discuss the basic requirements around level 3 surveys, and we'll touch on sort of inspection requirements and reporting requirements around level 3s. But the first thing I wanted to ask was, how do you decide whether you're able to carry out a level 3? So I'm thinking from the perspective of like competencies and knowledge
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that side of things.
I think the kind of the building pathology and the actual technical competencies in terms of the building itself and defects and everything else. My argument would always be, well, if you can do a level 2 on it, you can do a level 3 on it. From a practical point of view, there's no difference in the level of knowledge you need to have, right? Fundamentally. To kind of take an example, so we talk about a level 3. Level 3, you have to give a bit more information about repairs, right? And how you actually go about the repairs and some of the different options and timescales and everything else. To do that, you have to do the same thing on a level 2, because on a level 2, although you may not include that information in the report, you still have to have that in your mind when condition rating it, for understanding the severity of it. You have to have the same knowledge. And one of the things one of the kind of the ways I encourage people to move towards doing level 3 surveys is to kind of think, okay, well, approach your level 2s and go, okay, if I was doing it at level 3, would I do anything differently? What else would I do on this level 2 survey? Because, obviously we think about level 3 surveys as being for older properties, special properties. We hopefully we're going to see some guidance and some more information about the definition of a special property. But it's there. We do have it now in the retrofit standards, and I always advise people to go and look at those retrofit standards as a template for what we might see in the future for our home survey standards. But they've got, anyway, in that they've got a definition of special properties, and we think, okay, level 3s are for those special properties: listed, old stuff, complex stuff, poor condition stuff. But actually, there's also a good market in doing level 3s on fairly standard stuff. As we said, a level 3 is not only for old buildings. It doesn't say you can't do it on a relatively modern building. It might be you do it because a client wants a bit more information, because they're planning on doing some work to it, if they're planning on doing some retrofit work or some extension work or a massive renovation. They'll need a bit more detail. You get some of it. Some people will book a level 3 because they just want the best one that's available. There are people who, when faced with a choice, will walk into the shop and go, okay, I'll have the most expensive one because that's bound to be the best. My mum's like this. If she can't choose something, she'll go to John Lewis and she'll say, okay, I'll have the most expensive one. And that keeps her happy because she can work it out. She can deal with that. But
I get that.
There are some clients who are the same, and they pick the expensive one, and that's absolutely fine. So, you will find yourself doing level 3 surveys on relatively straightforward modern buildings, and you can go, okay, well, how would I, what more am I saying on what? So if you're approaching the level 2 and you're saying, okay, well, look, what more would I do for a level 3? You can start to get a feel for it. But of course, that's why you have to understand what is actually required for a level 3. And this is where it's what I try and get across to students or surveyors when I'm teaching them about level 3s. It's all well and good and saying, focusing on that building pathology. Make sure you do understand how that building is put together. Make sure you understand how the defects have occurred. Make sure you understand how you fix those defects. But also, you have to understand what you're going to report, because if you don't understand the difference in the reporting, you're going to be producing a level 2 and a level 3, and that's not satisfactory.
Oh, so I was going to say, should we touch on then the sort of the inspection requirements around level 3 and where they're similar and where they differ?
This is the one where I'm going to be honest, and I struggle a little bit because I can't find much difference between the two. If I'm honest, we have in the home survey standards, we've got our there's a section that covers the differences. So, for a level 1, you open one window per elevation. Level 2, it's one window per elevation plus one of each type. Level 3, it's all of them, right? Okay, that's windows. And it's just the opening of the windows. You still inspect all of the windows that are present. You're not going to ignore the windows just because you're not opening them. That's quite a small bit, subfloor voids. It's funny, when I do a teacher session on retrofit to some students, and one of the things we talk about is insulation of subfloor voids. I get overexcited about subfloor voids. It's one of my favourite subjects. But one of the things, we'll just look in the subfloor void because we talk about doing a level 3. So we'll just look in the subfloor void to decide whether we're going to insulate. how often do you actually get underneath the floor in most properties? It might be, if I'm optimistic, it's 1 in 10, realistically. You know, unless you're getting in. I was in a cellar a couple of days ago, and that's great. But most suspended timber floors, occasionally you might find a couple of boards under the stairs that will come up or whatever. But 95% of them, you're never looking under that floor. We've got to be honest about that. So the fact that there is a distinction as to whether you go in a subfloor void or not is at best marginal. It's almost confusing that it's there, because we know most subfloor voids are not inspected. And there's a few like that. In the loft, a level 3, you lift the insulation to check the upper side of what the ceilings are made out of. Level 2, you don't. I mean, to be fair, most ceiling construction types can be identified from looking up at the ceiling. 9 times out of 100, but that it's there. And there's a few other ones, but I would say that accounts to 15-20% in the inspection. Everything else
Yeah.
is kind of the same.
Are the differences in the length of the appointment, or length of the inspection? Sorry, appointment is probably the wrong word, but
I'm
because to find things, you're still going to have to spend the same amount of
yeah,
time. I would have thought.
I don't book them differently, if I'm honest.
No.
I allow for the same, because I can't see if I know that property is going to take me longer, I'll book, because it's a complicated property. But it's the same, the time taken to look open some windows, the time taken to move some items, and again, moving items is a complex issue. The one example I always give is that one level for gardens, for grounds, it says we carry out a thorough inspection. One level it says we do a comprehensive inspection. Which one do you reckon is which?
Yes, good point. Comprehensive sounds like it would be the higher, but thorough.
Yeah.
You'd expect to cover a similar amount of things, I would have thought. So yes.
The legal
complex.
definition, the dictionary definition, I looked these up. Thorough or comprehensive is without admission. So comprehensive means everything. Thorough means you'd look at is kind of most of it. Thorough is for level 3. Comprehensive is for level 2.
Oh, okay, interesting.
I know.
The wrong around.
It doesn't make much sense. We talk about one is a detailed visual inspection, one is a visual inspection. Well, if I'm standing there looking at a wall, I'm looking at the wall. I can only look at the wall. It's the same inspection. So, and I think this is again we come back to Hart and Large. I think we've made a rod for our own backs by trying to distinguish the levels of inspection between these two products. Because for me, if we say, okay, a level 3 is more detailed, and yet in reality we know that inspection can't be much more detailed, what we're actually saying to the courts is that if I do a level 3, I've got to find a defect. I'll be more likely to find the defect when you're not. So we're saying every time you do with every level 2, right, there's a risk that if you go to court, the judge would say, why didn't you do a level 3? Because you'd have found it. And they'll argue, well, it says in the document it's a more detailed investigation, but it's not. And that's where we're kind of causing a problem, and we need to look at that in the next version of it.
Is there scope, do you think, that it might cover, if it doesn't already, extra tools that you might use to analyse something further in terms of the type of moisture test you do for damp? Or
well, I think yes, there I do kind of say there is a difference, but it's not because of the home survey standards. It's actually because of the joint position statement. So if you don't know, that's the joint position statement between the Property Care Association, Historic England, and the RICS. It's not RICS guidance, but RICS do very specifically say on their website, this is the standard you will be judged against for carrying out any investigation of moisture in a building. Right? It's designed around traditional buildings, but fundamentally that's what applies. And in that, it certainly says that you have to have a better understanding of how moisture moves through buildings, the differences between the way it moves through traditional and modern buildings, and this idea of the greatcoat versus the anorak that we use to describe breathing buildings and kind of dry buildings. So you should understand more of that. It also says in there, it gives a list of some of the different ways of assessing moisture content in walls, and some of the different equipment in there. Now, it doesn't say you have to use it. it says you have to have an understanding of it. So you should understand what a gravimetric testing is, that carbide testing is. You should, but it also lists things like hygrometers and the thermometers. One of the key ways of identifying, for example, differentiating between condensation and a damp problem is looking at relative humidity levels, looking at wall temperatures, and using that information to identify problems. So I personally, I use those within level 3. So I actually use them in level 2 surveys because my damp meter does both of them. It does all that anyway, and we do have equipment that does it now. I still kind of record some of that information on a level 2 because it's useful, and if I see a problem, I'll still use that information. But I would say certainly now on a definitely you should be thinking about it in terms of a traditional building. And as we define traditional buildings in terms of solid walls, breathable, whatever you want to use. Certainly, you should be considering those pieces of equipment as more standard, because otherwise, not because you can breach HCS, home survey standards, but because you're ignoring the joint position statement. So I think you do have to really bear that in mind. Yes, it doesn't say we have to use them, but if you can understand them, the equipment is readily available. I have my old hygrometer on my desk. I don't use it anymore, but it's still, I haven't actually thrown it away yet. But I mean, that first one I got only cost me like 20-30 quid from Amazon, and it's perfectly functional. There's no reason not to have them. Obviously, the more complex stuff like drones and thermal imaging, for me, yet they're not a standard part of any survey level. I think they're an added extra, and I personally I don't use drones. I use a camera pole, and that's been enough for me. But I know a lot of people use them. A lot of people love them. I have a but I have a personal dislike for drones because I think they've killed all YouTube videos ever, because YouTube videos of so many people's drone footage. But anyway, I do accept they have a place within the survey market, but I think they're not yet at the point where we can say they should be standard, because I don't think within the industry there's a level of knowledge to understand what they can tell you and what they can't tell you. And drones have the limitations, same as any other kind of inspection. Yeah. But what we don't want to do is ever overpromise. If you say to a client, "Okay, I'm going to do a drone inspection of your roof," in their head, you're going to see every element of that roof and you're going to report on it in the best possible way. They're going to perceive it as if you're climbing up on that roof and looking at it, aren't you? Which, they're great, but it's not quite the same thing as that full level roof inspection. And I always make that point when I talk even about my pole camera, that it is something that is not, literally within every single survey report that if I use the pole camera, it will say this is not the same as a full roof level inspection. It still has its limitations, and we need to be clear on that. Same on thermal imaging. Thermal imaging I think is a great tool in the right hands. But I think you have to have such a deep understanding of what the technology is telling you. It is not just as simple as going out and buying the attachment for your iPhone and snapping a few pictures and thinking you understand thermography. It's a hell of a lot more complex than that. So I think we're way off that, but I can see it happening in a few years' time anyway.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to see how that changes. My final question, I think, on the inspection side, before we discuss a bit more around reporting requirements, is I don't think this is prescribed, but is there a certain length of time you'd expect or should be at the property for different levels? I was saying that the inspection length should really be the same for each, but is there a minimum time?
It's as long as it takes. I don't know. I suppose I'm perhaps trying to put this in the right way. So I'm an independent. Right? I work for myself. I set my own diary. I do 3 surveys a week. I don't do high volume. So I'm not going to be critical of those guys that do. Corporates serve a function. There's good reason for the way they work, and I'm not going to say they're wrong. But I do, for me, I can see massive difficulties in accurately predicting how long an inspection is going to take, and I can't get to grips with, okay, well, I've booked in this job, and then I know I've got 2 hours, and I've got to be at that other job in 2.5 hours, and I know it's half an hour, and I've got to get keys. That to me doesn't work, because you don't know what's going to be there until you get there. You know, how long is it going to take to follow that trail? I mean, you perhaps could be a little bit more, you need a bit more laxity when it comes to a level 3, because there is some requirement to move objects. So that might take a while to move the objects and put them back. You know, discussions with an owner about them moving the objects and putting them back. These things all take time, and you don't know how long they're going to take until you physically get there. You know, so I struggle with this concept of setting a time limit on anything. I mean, if I was thinking about how long it takes me to do surveys recently, and I reckon when I first started, I kind of aim to get really good at doing them quickly and trying to see how, you know, get quicker and quicker at doing them. And then I maybe reached a peak, and I think I'm just dropping down the other side now. It seems to be every day. It's just, I'm not that old. I'm still physically fit and active, so it's not a decrepitude problem.
Yeah.
I just, things take long. You tend to get more involved in it, and we talked about technology. These things take a little bit longer. You know, every time I'm taking a reading, I'm thinking about the relative humidity, wall temperatures, and bits and pieces like that. So I'm considering more information. So it is slowing down. It's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, these properties do take attention, and again, one of the things I always aim to do is provide the best possible level that I can do for what I'm doing on the property that's in front of me, and that takes the time it takes.
Awesome. I've one question actually. It's popped into my head coming back to something we touched on at the beginning of this particular topic. Before we go into the reporting requirements, was there've been some I suppose cases recently where potentially people or surveyors who are newer to the industry have maybe been forced to go out and do level 3s that they, you know, maybe they haven't got the experience at that point to do. I suppose, sort of around what we were discussing, what then determines when you're able to do a level 2 or a level 3? Because I suppose we're saying that they're similar in terms of what you'd need to know to be able to do an inspection.
Yeah,
So
and this is the challenge. So for me, it's not the survey level; it's the property.
Yeah.
You know, that's what it comes down to. Yeah, again, we can talk about the reporting requirements, and I'm saying what to report. You know, and how to report, and really that's what I tend to focus on, because, you know, that's I teach what I teach in a sort of a 6 hour. I do it over 3 days, over 2 lots of 3 hours, or 1 6 hour, and that's, you know, you can't cover all the building pathology you would need to know in 6 hours. I'm not entirely sure I know all the building pathology I'd ever need to know, but you know, but actually, what the knowledge around how to report, so I keep saying that's as equally important, you know. And I think that's what we need to kind of impart on students. But I'd say, because you should, if you can do a level 2, if you can inspect and understand a level 2, you can do a level 3 on that same building. Obviously, if you're drifting, if you can't do a level 2 on it, you can't do a level 3 on it. You know, and unfortunately, we're still at this. Fortunately, we're a kind of a self-regulating profession, in the sense that we, as individuals or employers, determine whether we are competent to do something. You know, and, you know, we've had, you know, people say, oh, maybe you can't do a level 3 until if you're ASSOC groups, you have to be MRICS and this sort of thing. But actually, that doesn't work, because just because you're MRICS doesn't mean you can do level 3 surveys, because you haven't had the experience. So we don't have any objective measure of what makes somebody competent to do a level 3 survey. I feel maybe there should be more around that, with more regulation, more kind of certification of that. You know, obviously we have you got the valuers registration scheme, which theoretically determines whether you're competent. Although there was a case recently where a guy just ticked the box, so it's not foolproof. But at least that exists. We don't have the same thing on condition-based surveys. You know, there isn't external checking.
It's a good way of looking at it, though. If you couldn't do a level 2 on that property in terms of the knowledge of the building pathology and so on, then by definition it gives you the answer for a level 3. So,
yeah. I mean, you then get into all, are you competent to do a level 2? That's you know. But again, when you want to talk about survey levels, one of the funny things about the way the home survey standards are written, it says that we have a level 1, and it says it basically says a level 1 is less detailed than the other two. It says a level 2 is more detailed than a level 1 and less detailed than a level 3, and a level 3 is more detailed than the other two. That's a circle, because they're not. We don't have this fixed basic level. So I actually make the argument that unless you have started doing level 1 surveys, you can't determine whether what's what more you need to do on a level 3, a level 2, and a level 3. You have to do a level. I've never done a level 1 survey, so technically, I'm not competent to do level 2 surveys. If you want to take a kind of an odd view on it, so yeah, it's a little bit of a mess. Again, we've got a couple of good documents out there that are setting a precedent for determining what is competent. So the joint position statement, for example, and to a lesser extent the retrofit standards are better documents for expressing what competency means. And again, rumor is that we'll see this guidance document on special properties will have is a bit more based around the joint position statement, and we'll have a little bit more of a framework as to what you would need to know to be competent.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a challenge to write because it's a very, very broad, broad subject. I mean, I'm keen to kind of see it when it happens. But I would like to see that. I'd like to see a little bit more definition of what a competent surveyor really is, so we can work with that definition.
I think it's useful for both employers and employees, or if you're on your own, because you've got something to judge against whether you're being asked to do the right thing. But should we touch then on the reporting requirements around level 3 and sort of the ways detail can be added into reports and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I mean, the starting point on a level 3 reporting requirement is, again, home survey standards. It says that the report should reflect the detail of the inspection. Now that's kind of that's first thing. So flooring that, of course, is we know that a level 2 inspection is pretty much the same as a level 3. So based on that, what you write in a level 2 is exactly the same as what you write in a level 3. I don't. That's a kind of a fairly sort of maybe slightly facetious view on it, but that's kind of what the document says. So I can certainly make that point that your level 2 should be the same as your level 3s for most of the property. Now, of course, it does go a little bit further, and it gives you a little bit more scope within there to write a little bit to write more. I think the way to view the document is it's not. It's maybe not an ideal way, but I think the only way you can view it is it's not there to set. Give you rigorous examples. It's to set an idea or a tone for your surveys. I think that I think is perhaps more of an approach to take. But I think we know they need to be detailed. The biggest mistake I think a lot of people do make with a survey is misunderstanding what detail actually means. They think, okay, well, if I just throw everything in, then that's a detailed survey. I see, because I've thrown everything I know about this into it. So, I've seen examples where people have put in, everything they know about the entire history of cavity wall construction. That's great. You've got a really good history of cavity wall construction. But if your client wanted to know that, we've got Wikipedia. Do you know what I mean? It's not necessary for them to understand, how these systems develop. They're not necessary to understand all of the different materials that have ever been used in the past to reach different type of construction. They want to know about the materials that are present in their property. It has to be relevant. The phrase I use, which I have stolen from somewhere else, is more is not better, better is better. Don't just keep churning in detail after detail after detail. If it doesn't have a purpose for your client, what's it there for?
And it ties back in what you said earlier around customer experience. If it might feel like you're offering more value through more information, but actually it's more of a headache to read through, and it's not getting to the point. Yeah.
And how many surveyors complain about the fact that clients don't read the reports? Again, much as we've had the people phone up because we've not read their terms, we've had the people phone up because they've not read their reports, and they're saying to you, "Oh, why didn't you mention this thing?" Well, look at page 57; it's in there. And we probably, I had an example where a friend of mine based up in sort of Bristol way, it's miles away from me, so not my patch. Couldn't make a direct recommendation, so they found a surveyor, locally, who, and it was an old property, quite small, but 1860, 1870, converted shop, I think. And it had some complex issues for it. And they'd obviously had a building survey done. It was under the old, before the HCS, termed a building survey. It sent it to me to read through. I read it. I don't know. I couldn't tell you whether that was a good building or a bad building from a point of view. It was, all the information was there, and there was some good technical information, but I couldn't make head nor tail as to what they were supposed to do with that information. And I've been doing my job long enough. I understand, what's there, but what am I doing with this? What repair? What do I go out and actually action? How do I resolve any of this?
Well, a question I've got actually from that is, and it comes back to what does the client want? Do you write the report from the perspective of, you wanted this level of survey in terms of detail, so I'm providing a report that answers that in terms of what I've seen on the investigation, or do you only report from the perspective of what the client wants to potentially do, for example, with the property? So if there's someone that's thinking of doing an overhaul, do you omit quite a bit of detail? You mentioned this about the outbuildings because they're possibly ripping out the kitchen and the upstairs and taking them all out, or do you still need to put a certain detail in?
Yeah, that's always a tough one, isn't it? Because much as they might have expressed an intention to you, that intention may change. And that's the thing. You might say, okay, they might say, oh yeah, we're going to rip that kitchen out, we're going to do all of this, we're going to do all of that, and then between moving in and or they might buy the house and then they move in and somebody's lost the job, or the money they thought was going to come through didn't come through, and therefore they don't have the money, so they're going to still have to live with that kitchen. If it's got defects, they're still going to be coming to you to say there's defects with it. So it is a tough one. I think we do need to obviously make what effort we can to talk to our clients, understand their needs, understand their plans, but we can't tempt that to exclude something unless we go again. We come back to is it written in my terms? Yeah. If they want an extension, for example, where they know they're going to knock down that conservatory, and they've written to you saying we're going to knock the conservatory down, please exclude that conservatory from the inspection. There's another conversation as whether you drop your price for that, and personally I wouldn't. But if they want it excluded, fine, we can do that. We can write that in the terms. We can very clearly specify that, and I can ignore that physically separate element of it. But again, personally, I'd still be kind of, if I saw particular significant details, I might certainly make a note of them. So we do have to be cautious with that idea of tailoring it too much to the client. Now, of course, we can tailor up. Tailoring up is absolutely fine. Tailoring down is dangerous, but tailoring up, they say they've got, again, as long as you've got the competency to do it, if they say to me, okay, we want additional information about this element, or we want to know what we can do with this, or, whatever it may well be. The classic one is, okay, well, can we knock down the wall between the kitchen and the dining room? And, what's your opinion on that? And they want specific detail. Certainly you're recording whether it's a stud wall or a masonry wall anyway, but they want that explained a little bit more detail. That certainly is we can go up, but I'm more reluctant to come down.
I get that. Is there anything, before we move on to our final topic around like sort of added detail in level 3 reports, is there anything else you'd like to touch on around, I suppose, the sort of key difference on level 2s to level 3s?
One bit of advice, I'll leave my kind of bit of advice I tend to give everybody on this is that remember that the detail you include in a report doesn't just have to be words. We live in a very visual age now. Everybody has a phone to hand with them all of the time now. Pictures are really key, and certainly I think we should be. Pictures for me should be part of every single level of survey report. It's not a strict requirement. And some people say that photographs in a level 3, no photographs in a level 2, or more photos in a level 2 than a level 3. Certainly, I would say that annotating photographs is a very beneficial thing to add into a level 3 survey. Again, you should have the technical equipment to be able to just draw on a photograph, whether you're just using, MS Paint will do it. There's other packages is available that can be really helpful to explain things to a client on an annotated photograph. The other big useful thing to include is diagrams. Technical diagrams that really give it a much better explanation of a construction type. Marked up floor plans are really useful. I use the example of a property which has got, I think, 4 or 5 different wall constructions. So I use within that where each wall type is color coded with a little key that explains what they are. Now, if I wanted to explain all of that in words, that's a big old chunk of text. And it's quite, you can't use your standard text for detailing which wall's which. And again, that's important for a client because they might be planning on doing work to it or retrofitting or whatever. So they need to know it. You need to explain it. but explain it in a diagram. Make it
Yeah.
easy. You can go, okay, yep, I can see on that floor plan. I can go and I can touch that wall. I know which wall that one is, and I know which wall that one is. Think around just chucking in 10,000 words on every element. It's not going to help anybody.
No, I agree. I think from a customer experience perspective, it's as you say, far easier to visually see something in a second rather than try and understand what's been described to you.
Yeah.
And possibly from your own benefit, you're going to have fewer follow-up questions when people are trying to understand where something is you're talking about, when they can just see an annotated picture. Yeah.
My favourite email, the favourite emails I ever get from clients, my favourite kind of response from clients are, thank you, no questions. If I get that, I'm a happy man. I'm available to talk to my clients, and I'll chat to them for hours about whatever's going on. But if they send me an email saying, thank you, no questions, that's a good day as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, good report. Nice. I think that rounds us off nicely. So tune in for topic 3, where we'll be discussing added detail in level 3s.